If I ask you when it comes to content creation, what is more important, the creator or the consumer, what would your answer be? Think about what your answer would be, and by the end of this video, let's see if your answer has changed at all. Now these are nice roads. They're well worn, they're well traveled, and people know about them. And those are the roads that Critical Role made. But when it came to Campaign 3, Critical Role didn't want to use these roads. They made these roads in Campaign 1 and laid the foundation for everybody else. And then they reused these roads again and really made them perfect in Campaign 2. But in Campaign 3, they didn't want to use these roads. They wanted to go somewhere new. They wanted to go over there. This is what Critical Role saw. Not just roads, but everything in between and around them. With Campaign 3, Critical Role wanted to not just reuse the roads they'd already built, but they wanted to take what they learned from that and build everything they could around it. Lofty goals, truly, but they told us so at the very beginning of the campaign, that Campaign 3 was gonna be like nothing we'd ever seen before, that we weren't ready for it, that there were gonna be wild new innovations, it was going to be crazy.
Yeah, we got a lot of fun surprises planned, and ultimately we're just excited to explore new ways to tell our story, along with some new storytellers. So don't be alarmed if and when we mix things up. This campaign is going to be a bit of a wild ride.
But another question for you is this. As a content creator, if you make something and your audience doesn't resonate with it, you can choose to do one of two things. Do you either not do that again and learn from what the audience told you, or double down on it and hope that the audience will eventually come to like it? Because while a lot of content creators see this idea in their heads and they want to go buck wild with it, and it doesn't work for their audience, some of them continue to do this and it eventually works for their audience and they learn to enjoy it. Most of them don't. Most of the time, when a content creator goes away from the tried and true structure and tries something new, the audience that's there for the tried and true structure does not enjoy this. They want that. But sometimes it works and the audience can go with it and go with the flow. And most of the core audience, the ones that are dedicated fans, don't care what you make. They'll watch anything you upload. But the vast majority of them usually don't. So what new things did Campaign 3 give us, unlike the other two campaigns? What version of this was Critical Role hoping to deliver to us that was new, that was crazy, that we weren't prepared for? What were those things? Well, first things first, not all of the cast brought brand new characters. About half of the cast brought in characters from a previous miniseries that was not well received. So the excitement of seeing brand new characters and learning all about them was kind of tarnished for half the cast who had already seen these characters before, and most of them weren't well liked. On top of that, Travis's character, Bertram Bell, was very clearly much higher level than the rest of the cast. Now, of course, this did garner interest as to why Travis was playing a character that was way higher level than the rest of the party, but then it very quickly became apparent that his character would not be sticking around for very long. Because if you don't know, a lot of people have complained that Critical Role has felt very scripted for a while, and like everything has been planned and prepared ahead of time, and it's not actually a live D&D game where everything is off the cuff. Now that's an argument for another time. However, it added a lot of fuel to that fire when it was very clearly shown that Bertram Bell would not be sticking with this cast for a very long time. Bertram Bell's death was very clearly a catalyst for the rest of the campaign following on, and that's fine to have, and that's okay for a player and a DM to discuss. However, it set a very bad tone for everybody who was watching it, because the idea that the show was scripted really started to feel a lot more true. But then Travis brought on Chetney, who was in and of itself an already established character from a Christmas one-shot, and they just changed his name and a couple of things. So it wasn't really a new character, but it was still a new character. Another thing he announced was that the last Thursday of every month, there would be no Critical Role show. Critical Role has been live streamed every single Thursday for as long as the campaigns have been going on. And they announced with Campaign 3 that the last Thursday of every month, they were going to be taking off as a break. So there would only be 3 Critical Role shows a month instead of the established 4. Now later on, they started using that 4th Thursday of the month to live stream other shows like Candela Obscura, but everybody was hoping for Critical Role on Thursdays. That is the established road that has been happening for almost a decade. So when Critical Role started using this road for something else, People weren't happy about it. But there was one other thing that Critical Role announced at the start of Campaign 3 that at the time didn't seem like it would be such an issue, but much later on now can really be felt. And that was the end of actual live streams. The end of it being a live streamed game, to me, didn't seem like an overly negative thing at first. It made sense from a content creator standpoint, and I could understand why they were doing that. But to a lot of people, this marked a significant change for Critical Role, more so than any other changes they had made. Because the idea that what you were watching was unscripted and was live was made all that more prominent by the fact that it was that, live streamed. What you were watching was happening right here, right now, in front of you. Somewhere in Los Angeles, those Critical Role cast members are sitting at that table playing the game as it unfolds before your very eyes and theirs. And with this change, yes, you were still watching a game that was unscripted, but it was filmed ahead of time. The cast had already gone through this event, and you were experiencing it not with them, but after them. They were no longer watching everything unfold with you. They were now sitting in live stream chats well after it was already filmed and recorded, smirking along with the knowledge that you don't know. And there have been a lot of criticisms thrown at Critical Role's Campaign 3 in regards to why it is not doing as well and why it is not as popular as the other ones. And a lot of them have merit, but an arguably very big point of those criticisms is the fact that it is no longer a live streamed game. It is a pre-recorded game that you are then watching later. A positive change Critical Role made, however, is that they involved Robbie Daymond in the start of it. But he didn't last long and was gone after a couple episodes. No way. Huh. This is not a bit. I actually ran out of gas. But let's take this time and look back at the start of the video where I asked, what is more important when creating content? The consumer or the content creator? And after all the things I've discussed thus far, who do you think is benefiting more? There are more changes with Critical Role to talk about for the rest of this video, but let's do a quick check-in right now where we're at with what I've talked about. All the changes I've talked about thus far have benefited who more than the other? Me and you, the people watching Critical Role? No, these aren't really that great of changes, but you know what they are great for? The cast and crew. They're no longer beholden to a live schedule that they have to meet every single week. They can record the episodes they want whenever they want. It frees up so much time. They can also record multiple episodes in one week if they want, or record no episodes some weeks if they want. They don't have to worry so much about sticking to a set schedule that has been predetermined by them nonetheless anymore. They can do what they want more freely in both their professional and personal lives. Granted, they didn't always have to be beholden to the Thursday schedule. A lot of times cast and crew members would miss out on Thursday live shows because they had other things to do and other places to be, and that's completely fine. But it makes scheduling and going to certain things a lot easier when it's not an absolute necessity that you have to be at the Critical Role studio every Thursday for a minimum 4 hours. But let's get some gas here, and then we'll talk about a couple more changes they've made and how those changes have affected us, the consumers, and them, the creators. Okay. Let's see if Carlac starts now. There we go. So let's check in. Where are we right now? Critical Role has gone through a large majority of its third campaign at this point. And there's a lot of changes to the way Critical Role runs its show, to the way we consume the show, and to the large majority of the company and the product as a whole. Most of these changes benefit the creators a lot more than us, the consumers, but nonetheless, majority of us are still watching Critical Role. It's still getting decent viewership, and it's still seeing decent numbers. Although those numbers are not as high as they were back in Campaign 2, it's still getting a decent amount of people to watch. But although people are watching, the feeling of the overall community is really beginning to falter. Thanks in no short to a lot of different things, like them no longer doing live giveaways at the halfway break point, well, because it's not live anymore. And granted, this was something they stopped during Campaign 2 as well, but it was a well-beloved thing that was sad to have seen gone away permanently. But on a more interesting note, they stopped showing brand new artworks during the break times of each episode. In the previous campaigns, during the very beginning and the break point of each episode, you would see new artwork made by a bunch of fan creators that would be displayed on the live show. And while they still have artwork being shown, some of these artworks have been on every single episode since the beginning. It's not as if they had a shortage of creators making fan art for them, but that has now been relegated to a blog post on their website. It is no longer a redo every single episode to showcase brand new fan art as it used to be. Something that was very, very critical to the brand and the community at large. That really brought the community together and made it feel like a community. And that of course goes back to the idea of it no longer being live streamed. That feeling of watching it live as a community, yes, is still there because you are still watching a live stream together. It's not actually live, but we've already talked about that. So at this point, we are veering off the road quite a bit that has been laid out from previous campaigns, and we're getting dangerously close to brand new territory. And then right at the peak of one of the arcs of campaign 3, the party is split. And I don't mean they split to go check out different parts of a dungeon. No, they were split across different continents. And it was a dramatic moment followed by a series of episodes that really dragged the story down. Because while half of the cast was on this side of the world and the other half of the cast was on this side of the world, they weren't happening at the same time. You would have multiple episodes with this cast, and then after all of this stuff was done, we would go back in time and we would do multiple episodes with this cast. And not only that, but each cast got their own set of guest appearances from other people who are now playing new characters to help them on their journey on both sides. And it's not like this was really a new thing. Critical Role has had guest appearances by many different people over the many years that they've been in production, but the vast majority of those guest appearances happen with the entire cast still at the table. And those guest appearances didn't always happen for very long, and most of them were relatively short and concise. This was different. This was another brand new, never seen before thing for Critical Role. And for many, including myself, it was a bit of a mixed bag, because I didn't really care much for the guest appearances and the characters that they brought, because I knew once each one of their arcs was done, the characters were gone. So I didn't really need to get invested in people who weren't going to be sticking around. Because you see, we already made that mistake with Robbie Daymond. We all thought Robbie Daymond was going to be sticking around for a vast majority of Critical Role's Campaign 3, but then he left after a couple of episodes at the beginning, which really was a shame, because out of all the guest appearances Critical Role has had on all 3 of their campaigns, Robbie Daymond is by far mine and many people's favorite. Now, of course, if you're caught up on Campaign 3, this is a little bit of a spoiler for you, but Robbie Daymond does come back for a decent amount of episodes that are still airing today, so he is, for now, still part of the crew. But we'll see how long that lasts. But nonetheless, after many episodes following this crew and that crew, the cast all get back together, they reconvene, all the guest appearances disappear, and we get back to our regular scheduled programming. But then we had a very crucial moment in Campaign 3, and it was the moment that I started thinking about making this video. And until recently, this video had a completely different premise, and something else changed that. There is a critical moment that made me want to make this video, and then shortly after was another critical moment that made me re-script this video. So let's talk about the moment that Critical Role looked at this road for the last time, turned its head, and dove in to the complete unknown. But after a long, very difficult battle with an insane villain that Critical Role has encountered before, Sam Riegel makes a bold choice to sacrifice his character to get everybody else out. And it was interesting to watch it happen, because Critical Role is no stranger to rule of cool over rules as written. However, the amount of times that it actually happens where rule of cool trumps the rules as written is very few and far between. So it was interesting to see when Sam Riegel decided that Fresh Cut Grass was going to detonate his core and take himself out and the villain, and Travis Willingham asked, "Can you do that?" And Matthew Mercer said, "Yep, we're rolling with it." That was odd. Most people assumed this was something he had written on his character sheet that he could just do at any time. But a couple of us saw that and went, this seems weird. This seems like rule of cool and an oh shit moment, a Hail Mary, a player sacrifice for the sake of everybody else. and Matthew ran with it. Now, I have nothing against that. I have run similar scenarios, incredibly similar scenarios actually, with my own cast members, players. I don't have a live show, where one of them wanted to sacrifice himself in order to get everybody else out and do something really interesting with their Warforged character that wasn't rules as written, but I allowed it because I thought it would make for a memorable moment. But the more stranger part was that immediately after this moment happened, at around the break time for this show, Matthew tells everybody to get up and leave while they are mourning Fresh Cut Grass's sacrifice. He tells everybody to get up from the table and leave. He himself gets up and leaves from the table, and Abria sits down and introduces the Crown Takers. And then after the break, the cast is gone, and we are back with Exandria Unlimited's Crown Takers. And when I watched this happen, I could not believe this is what Critical Role decided to do. And there were many thoughts going through not just my head, but many other people's, because everybody doesn't want to believe that Critical Role is scripted and that everything is planned out beat by beat. It would be impossible to do that, but when you see this happen, it makes you really wonder a lot of things. Because let's go with the scripted idea, okay? If this is scripted to happen, that means Abria and the cast of the Crown Takers had to be there on set, ready to go, after they were done doing the initial start of that episode. So no matter what happened at the beginning of that episode, the Crown Takers were taking over at the halfway mark. Either nobody could have died during that final fight, or everybody could have died during that final fight, and it didn't matter. The Crown Takers were going to be appearing after the break, which really seems like a monumental smash into a brick wall for pacing, which really is very, very scary to think about, because it doesn't matter what's going on, your pacing and your story revolves around, after break, Crown Takers take over. And the show is now about them, not the Critical Role cast. And the fact that Sam Riegel's character died, and everyone was very upset. The cast, crew, and the people watching were very upset and very emotional watching this happen. And to take all that emotion, the very peak of all this story writing, and these thoughts and grievances and emotions, and fucking brick wall them and throw them away, and now we're talking about the Crown Takers and we're doing something else entirely, was unbelievably baffling to me. And you could watch the live viewership on Twitch and YouTube completely fucking nosedive after the break. The numbers were very, very high right before break. An insane moment had happened. Lots of people definitely told their friends what was going on and got them to come watch the stream. And then after the break, when they realized we're watching the Crown Takers now, a vast majority of that audience completely skipped the fuck out, myself included. I was not there to watch the Crown Takers. I was not there to see what's going on behind the scenes with this cast of crew that I do not care for. And it was that moment I started writing the script for this video and trying to put my words and thoughts together on how this made me feel and what was going on with Critical Roles as a company, and what were they trying to tell for this story, and why were they telling it in this way. However, the Crown Takers only lasted for about an episode, and then we came right back to the cast of Critical Role, and Robbie Daymond appeared back in as a permanent, we'll see, member. So when that happened, I decided, you know what? It's not that big of a deal that this happened. I'm going to shelve the script for later, and maybe I'll come back to it. So as the episodes go on, and Bell's Hells gets over the death of Fresh Cut Grass, and they continue on with the story that they're trying to tell, we now know that there's a live show coming up for Critical Role, and a lot of rumors and speculation are suggesting that Sam Riegel will return in either a new character or a reforged automaton during the live show, which of course makes sense. Sam Riegel is a very outgoing person who does a lot of acting and a lot of stage, and for him to debut a new character during a live show versus a recorded one makes perfect sense to anybody. And lo and behold, during the live show, Mr. Sam Riegel himself comes out with his brand new character. One edgy son of a bitch. But a couple days after the live show, a new video shows up on Critical Role's YouTube page, and it's from Sam Riegel, talking about where he's been. And this is the most recent key moment that really puts a lot of things into perspective. Because during this YouTube video, Sam Riegel announces to all of us that the reason he's been missing is because he's been dealing with cancer.
You may have noticed I was gone for a bit. Part of that was because sometimes robots go boom, but mostly it was because for the past few months I've been dealing with a medical issue that I wanted to talk to you about.
Sam's announcement video put a lot of things in perspective. It made sense why fresh cut grass went out the way that he did. It made sense why Matthew allowed it to happen without making any kind of rules or anything like that. It made sense why we suddenly cut to the crown takers no matter what had happened in that episode. And it made sense why there was such a long delay to wait until the live show for Sam Riegel to make his appearance back on the show. And Sam himself didn't know if he was going to be able to make it to that live show and if he was even going to be prepared to come back and perform. But nonetheless, he did, it went very well, and now we know. And if you remember my question at the beginning, where I asked, what matters more when it comes to content creation, the consumer or the creator? Well, it depends. Because in moments like these, where I am completely baffled, staring at my computer screen, wondering why they would choose to tell the story like this, why they would choose to run events like this, why they would choose to do such and such thing, I don't know what's going on in the background. None of us do. And it's only until later when we get revealed, oh, that's why that happened. That's why this is going on. And then it all makes sense and it all clicks. And even though I hadn't really voiced these frustrations to anybody except for like a small handful of my friends, I felt really ashamed that I was so angry at Critical Role and the way they were doing storytelling. Because the reason they did it that way was to give Sam Riegel as much time to deal with his life-threatening disease. Because the truth is, sometimes shit happens. Sometimes you are dealt a garbage hand, and you gotta deal with it the best way you can. But other times, you are not dealt a garbage hand, and you are actually making the play in front of you worse of your own volition. And in doing so, you realize something isn't working and you have to change. Because it is no secret, like I've mentioned a couple of times in this video, that the viewership for Critical Role's Campaign 3 is steadily going down. And a lot of people talking online are talking about how Critical Role Campaign 3 feels the worst out of all 3 campaigns. And in many aspects, its characters, its story, its pacing, and this drop in viewers, of course, leads to a drop in revenue. Now, revenue, when it comes to content creators, especially large company content creators, is a really tricky thing to narrow down how exactly it's made and in what proportions. For an example, I, as a content creator, make a majority of my money through AdSense. Every time you watch an advertisement on one of my videos, you probably saw one on this video, I make a tiny bit of money from that. And as my videos get more and more views, more and more people see the advertisements, and those advertisements pay me more and more money. But that is not the only way I or many content creators make money. It is simply my most profitable one, because I also sell merch on my merch store. I also do live streams where I can get donations. And Critical Role makes money the same ways. They definitely have ads running on both their Twitch channel and YouTube channel. They sell a plethora amount of merch, as you can see here. They also get donation money through bits on Twitch and super chats and super thanks on YouTube. But the vast majority of Critical Role's income lies in 2 key things: the Twitch subscriptions and sponsorships. And for many content creators, that latter one, sponsorships, is the #1 thing that keeps content creators in business and operational. Think of it this way. Earlier when I said that AdSense is the most profitable way I make money from content creation, most content creators, AdSense pays them the least amount of money. The merchandise I sell is print on demand, so I only make between $2 to $5 per every piece of merchandise that I sell. My YouTube channel is too goddamn small to get any kind of sponsorship revenue. The closest thing to a sponsorship I've ever had is my affiliation with Adventure Dice. There's a link down below that if you click it and you buy any type of dice or any product on their website, if you use code Valkyrie at checkout, you get 10% off that purchase. And every time you do that, I get a small little kickback from Adventure Dice. But most sponsorships, and especially the ones Critical Role take on, do not work that way. They are paid a large amount of money from a company to talk about them right before the episode begins. They then guarantee that sponsor a certain amount of views, and that sponsor pays them to meet that amount of views. And if they go over that many views, the sponsor will usually end up paying them a little bit more. But if they don't meet that viewership goal, if a sponsor does not get the number of views that a content creator said they could generate for them, that sponsor is not likely to return a second time. And this has absolutely happened with Critical Role. Because if you watched Campaign 2 with the Mighty 9, I want you to think about who was the primary sponsor for the vast, vast majority of Campaign 2. Remember? D&D Beyond. They had a sponsorship read for D&D Beyond every single episode, bar a small fraction. Now think about how many sponsor reads they've done for D&D Beyond during campaign 3. It's a lot less, isn't it? And of course, Critical Role as a company knows that this is happening. They have a massive amount of people working on that show, plus all their side products and everything. And there's definitely somebody looking at the analytics for both their YouTube and Twitch accounts, and they're seeing revenue going down. They're seeing sponsorships not happening as frequently and not paying as much. So in order to pay their bills, in order to pay their cast and crew and make sure everybody stays making the same amount of money, if not more, Critical Role has to do something in order to keep profits up. So what do? Well, they do the same thing that every company in existence does nowadays. They make a subscription platform of their own.
Hello everyone! Holy heck, this is a big update for us. As some of you may have heard, we are starting our very own membership service.
That's right, membership service! Beacon is finally here.
Think about it. When do companies and content creators start making their own subscription platforms? When they're financially successful? When they're doing really well on the internet? No! It's when they're starting to see a dip in revenue and they need to make that money back immediately. You think College Humor, now Dropout, was doing so financially well that they decided, you know what, let's make our subscription service Dropout TV? No, because then they would just upload all the content they want onto YouTube. They would have no need to do that because they would be already making enough, if not a decent amount of money. But they saw a way to make more money and keep themselves afloat with Dropout TV. Same thing for Watcher, same thing for Try Guys, and absolutely the same thing for Beacon. Because you need to understand that Twitch usually takes a 50-50 split of revenue from everything you make. Critical Role no doubt has a better split than that. And YouTube's split is 70-30. So 70% of the profit you make goes to you, where the other 30% goes to YouTube. But if you make your own subscription platform where you're in control of everything, well, you can garner a lot more money that way. Suddenly, if somebody is paying $1 to see the content, well, on Twitch, you're only seeing 50 cents, and on YouTube, you're only seeing 70 cents. But if you own the platform, and you can set the prices how you want, and you can split them however you want, well, you're suddenly making 90, if not 95 cents out of that dollar. So of course people gotta do this. However, the massive caveat is that it is paid for. It is a paywall. So if anybody wants to see any of this content, they have to pay for it, which is a way worse experience than watching it for free on YouTube. And do you ever notice that all these platforms will always say that their best content will still remain free on YouTube as it always has been? But if you want to pay for little behind the scenes and smaller shows, you can do that on their subscription platforms. And some people see that as a very weird thing to do. Why am I getting the best you can offer for free, but I'm getting worser versions of smaller things, but I'm paying for those? Well, it's because they need to funnel the most amount of people in to their paid services. If they tried to funnel people on free websites like YouTube with their inferior products so that you could see the better products for money, they wouldn't get a lot of people that way. At least if you have the best product you can offer for free and you get super mega fans that really want to support you and they don't care about the products or the quality of anything else, they'll pay to see that little bit of extra stuff. But again, the key important thing here is that if they were very profitable and financially successful, they wouldn't need to make Beacon. They could upload all the content they want onto Twitch and YouTube and be happy. But they're not, because the revenue is going down and they need to make that back. And Beacon is hopefully their answer to that. So going back to the initial question, when it comes to content creation, what matters more, the creator or the consumer? Right now you're probably saying, well, based off of all the things we've talked about in this video, it depends. And you'd be right, but I'm gonna give you my answer now. It depends is a fine, safe answer. But the hard truth answer is that it is always, has been, and always will be, the consumer matters more. So why does the consumer matter more than the company? Well, because without the consumer, the company doesn't exist. But without the company, the consumer still exists, and they can find another company. Because it doesn't matter how much of a fan you are of said product or of said company, there can always be a chance where you will turn your attention elsewhere. And that's already happened with Critical Role. You can see them in real time. The amount of people watching Campaign 3 versus the amount of people who watched Campaign 2, on average, very different. There have been many diehard fans who have turned away from Campaign 3 because it didn't offer them the same joy and excitement that they got from Campaign 2 or even Campaign 1. And Critical Role as a brand relies on you to interact with their live shows and their merch and their products, because if you don't, then they make no money. So even if Critical Role wants to try all these crazy new things, they want to change up the format, they want to do new things and wild things that nobody's really seen before, and all these crazy things that they have ideas for, none of them matter if they don't land with us, the consumers. And of course, that doesn't just go for Critical Role. Any YouTuber wants to venture out and try new things, and it's very scary a lot of the times, because when you stick to something for so long, creatively, you get drained from doing the same thing over and over and over again, and you creatively need to change and do something else. But many times, your audience isn't at the same point of change as you are, and when you do change, your audience does not change with you. And that leads to creators trying new things, getting really discouraged because nobody cared about the new thing they tried, and they quit altogether. Now, Critical Role hasn't done something that drastic. At this point, they are still running Campaign 3 on most Thursdays as per usual. But as I mentioned, through this very long video, they've made many changes to their overall company and the Critical Role live show. Minor changes here and there, effectively testing the waters. What can they get away with? What can they do less of? What can they do more of? And what will really fluctuate the incoming profit? Now, I want to be clear, I don't think Critical Role is like at the verge of bankruptcy or anything like that, not at all. I think they're still doing very well, but I do believe they are not doing as well as they were doing in last campaign. I think Critical Role is starting to rely more on income outside of its main show. I think Campaign 2 and just the views and subscriptions and revenue from that show alone was the driving force of payroll for Critical Role. But I do not think that's the case for Campaign 3. I think they're relying a lot more on revenue generated from advertisements outside of Campaign 3, on merch sales, on board games, and no short of Amazon's Vox Machina shows. I think those supplemental products are driving a lot more income for Critical Role than their primary show. And I can understand why they're doing all the aspects I talked about. I understand why they made Beacon. I understand why they're doing Candela Obscura. I very much understand why they're doing Daggerheart. I can fully understand all these things. And as a creative person, I would also be wanting to do all these things. But at the core, you are a company that relies on your audience and your consumers to stay in profit and stay as a company. And if your consumers do not land with your changes, with your new ideas, then unfortunately, your changes and your new ideas fall by the wayside. As a side tangent, how many of you have been watching YouTubers from when you were very, very young and still watch those same YouTubers today? And if you do still watch those same YouTubers today, how many of them are still doing the exact same content they've always done since you were young, or have actually changed and done wildly different things, but you were still able to follow along with them? Because most YouTubers, when they try to make a change, their audience does not want to change with them. Critical Role as a company is changing. They've been changing for a while now, and you can see those changes in real time and why they're making them. A lot of people won't realize why these things are happening or why they don't watch Critical Role anymore. They will chalk it up to, Campaign 3 just wasn't for me, and they'll move on from that. And it's those viewers that Critical Role is very much the most afraid of, because the bulk of an audience that interacts with a product doesn't go very deep into that product beyond simple interaction. The vast majority of people who watch Critical Role's campaigns, be it when they're live or even in the VOD afterwards, are not buying their merch, are not interacting in chat, are not following them on Twitter, are not subscribing to Beacon. The bulk of Critical Role's audience simply watch the shows when they come out or watch them on their own time as VODs. That is the bulk of Critical Role's audience. And it's that bulk that are very fragile to Critical Role as well. Because if that large majority starts seeing Critical Role 3 as not for them and turning away, that is a massive source of revenue that Critical Role will lose out on. And as I've been saying this whole video, that is already happening. You can watch it in real time. Some of these choices are made with good intentions, just to test the waters, and because creatively they want to do these things. Some of these are for their own priorities and for their own physical well-beings. Because the sad truth is that every time any kind of company or YouTuber comes out with statements like, hey, we need to take time off, or we're gonna do something a little bit different, and I hope you guys understand, a large majority of the audience is going to respond by saying, absolutely, you're fine, don't worry, take as much time as you need, we'll always be here, we'll come right back. Most of them don't. Most of them find other companies or other YouTubers to consume their products. And that is the sad truth of many realities. I couldn't really think of how to end this video, but I'm gonna leave it with this statement. How Critical Role decides to end Campaign 3, and if they are going to continue and do a Campaign 4, how they go about Campaign 4 will be extremely telling for what's going on behind the scenes as a company. A lot of people think Campaign 4, if it does happen, is going to be run with Daggerheart instead of D&D, which for many reasons makes sense. Critical Role probably wants to distance themselves from Hasbro as a company because Hasbro has not been seen very well in recent times. And with the launch of Daggerheart, which by their own admission is meant for long-form narrative campaigns, it makes complete sense why they would run Daggerheart for their next adventure. They can keep absolutely everything about the show in-house. But the real telling thing about that will be how many people watch Critical Role because it's D&D versus because it's Critical Role. And is running a campaign using the Daggerheart system instead of D&D system more profitable overall? Because the initial response would be no. Have you seen Candela Obscura's viewer numbers? Candela Obscura is not a very well received system by Critical Role, and they made a live show for it as well that didn't even sell out. Now I need to point out that not every show needs to sell out, but this is Critical Role. Most, if not every single time they do a live show, it sells out. I think Critical Role believes it has the legs to stand on their own system, and they're going to go ahead with Daggerheart for Campaign 4. I think Campaign 3 is going to end in a massive, colossal boom that will erase a whole lot of things, allowing for a brand new, fresh start of their campaign worlds in their own system. But does Daggerheart have the foundation to keep Critical Role profitable, or does it even need to be? Are all of Critical Role's other side projects profitable enough to keep all their staff members in pay that Daggerheart doesn't need to be the driving force anymore? That very well could end up being the case. Daggerheart as Campaign 4 may not need to be the flagship product for Critical Role anymore because everything else is profitable enough on their own. Time will tell, and I am very eager to see what happens.